Listen to the quiet that arrives when you remove every convenience that cushions your choices. In that silence, you will meet the single, simple truth that has been hidden by comfort. What you allow becomes what you are. This is not mysticism. It is the most practical law of change and of ruin. The greatest thefts are not committed with force, but with ease. The small, comfortable compromises you make today carve the path of your future without ceremony. If you wish to reclaim your life, you must learn to be betrayed by ease and to love austerity as a teacher. There is an old school of thought in Japan that does not begin with gentleness but with attention. Miyamoto Musashi, the most famous duelist of his era, taught that one who knows the value of every breath and every stance will not be overwhelmed by the sudden. Musashi did not romanticize battle. He studied the habits that lead men to victory and to ruin. Where attention falters, disaster enters. Where convenience is chosen over discipline, the self is lost. This is the first lesson we must carry into the world of modern ease. Attention is the currency of destiny. Consider Hidetaka, a man not unlike many of us. He is not a legend. He is a software project manager in his late 30s, living in a small apartment above a noisy street. He eats convenience because there is always a deadline. He chooses scrolling at night because the mind is tired. He tells himself that these things are temporary, that life will be different when the promotion arrives, when the body reshapes, when time is found. At 40, Hidetaka discovers that the promotion brings more demands, the body resists changes, and time is not found but made. The danger was not in a single poor choice. The theft came from 1,000 comfortable decisions, stacked one on top of another, until they formed a wall he could not see over. We begin then with an image Musashi would understand: a young warrior sharpening a sword. Not because he loves the steel, but because he understands that rust does not assault suddenly. Rust arrives at the edge through neglect, through small omissions. The modern equivalent is the erosion of capacity, the slow dimming of attention, resolve, and presence under the weight of comfort. To guard against rust is to cultivate daily forms, systems that are indifferent to mood and circumstance. Samurai called these forms kata. They are training sequences repeated until the body and mind know them as second nature. Systems are kata for modern life. They are not inspirational slogans. They are simple, often boring agreements with oneself that remove choice when discipline falters. Yagyū Munenori, commander of the shogun's fencing school and teacher to generations of swordsmen, insisted on the discipline of the small deed. He wrote that the meaning of training is not to master a technique, but to craft the way one approaches life. The practice of stepping to the left 3 times before breakfast, of bowing with intention, of limiting food when one is inclined to excess. These were not spectacular acts. They were the scaffolding of character. Munenori knew that power did not arrive from one monumental effort, but from the accumulation of modest, non-negotiable rituals. For Hidetaka, the equivalent would be not a grand retreat or a dramatic overhaul, but the decision to wake and sit for 10 breaths before looking at his phone, to prepare one clean meal each evening, to close the laptop at a fixed hour regardless of unfinished tasks. These are not heroic, they are surgical. There is a temptation in every age to misplace heroism. We imagine that courage is a single thunderbolt, an irresistible surge that sweeps away inertia. Samurai philosophy teaches otherwise. Tsukahara Bokuden, a swordmaster famous for his encounters where he refused to draw his sword, taught that one must learn to win without fighting. The greatest mastery is to remove the need for conflict entirely by changing the ground on which it is contested. Applied to life, this teaches us to eliminate temptations and friction points, rather than rely solely on willpower. If Hidetaka sits for hours at night because the television and phone lie within reach, the wiser move is to remove these objects from his immediate environment. If sweets are a nightly weakness, do not wage war at midnight. Do not keep sweets at home. The path of least resistance should not be the path of least restraint. Sasaki Kojirō, famed for his long sword and impeccable timing, offers another lesson. Precision in small things yields decisive advantage. Kojirō practiced his kata for hours until each motion was exact. It was not flair, but exactness that won him duels. The modern battle is often not with an opponent, but with time and attention. Precision means defining clear edges, what work you will do, when you will do it, and what you will reject. It means the strategic narrowing of your life so that the few things you commit to receive the fullness of your capacity. The Japanese word shokunin describes the craftsman's dedication to mastering a single art. In practice, this becomes an argument for elimination, removing roles, responsibilities, and noise that dilute mastery. Hidetaka, who tries to be a perfect teammate, father, friend, and hustling entrepreneur all at once, learns the brutal intelligence of narrowing. When he focuses on fewer things, his action becomes like Kojirō's blade, long, deliberate, and lethal in its effectiveness. But these disciplines are not mechanical. They require an inner shift that Zen practitioners have named mushin, no mind. This is not emptiness, but a mind uncluttered by needless emotion and story. It is presence that does not flinch under pressure. Zen offers a paradoxical method for escaping the comfort trap. By engaging fully with small austerities, you create a mind that cannot be seduced by convenience. Silence, for example, creates spaces where thought settles and true preference emerges. For the samurai, silence was not absence, but a sharpening agent. Sitting quietly for a fixed period each day, as Hidetaka reluctantly begins to do, is not a route to spiritual bypass. It is training the neural pathways to resist the cheap comforts that would steal his future. Surrender enters here as a misunderstood word. Far from capitulation, surrender in samurai and Zen practice is a deliberate lowering of resistance to what is unavoidable, the unavoidable grind of daily discipline. When a warrior accepts that tomorrow will hold training, not triumph, he relinquishes the drama of impatience. Surrendering to process is a form of power. It consigns vanity and immediate gratification to the margins so that the deeper aims can emerge from steady action. Hidetaka experiences this truth when he stops attempting to feel motivated and instead vows to do what is necessary irrespective of feeling. The vow is not romantic, it is functional. Over months, surrender to process converts tiny actions into a new identity. He becomes a person who keeps his agreements. Identity is the crucible where all of this is forged. Bushido, the way of the warrior, is less a rulebook and more an identity formation. A man does not become a samurai by acquiring weapons. He becomes a samurai by assuming a life that matches the name. Identity precedes action. It is far easier to repeat one more push-up when you already identify as someone who trains every morning. If Hidetaka defines himself as the man who prioritizes presence, his choices will align with that image. But identity cannot be wished into being. It is sculpted by repeated acts, each a small chisel strike. The samurai used rituals, clothing, posture, and language to shape identity. For modern life, the rituals will look less theatrical and more domestic. The order in which you brush your teeth, the way you prepare your desk, the low-tolerance rule for digital distraction. these are not vanity, they are identity hygiene. There is a story told of a student who sought to learn swordsmanship from a master. The student wanted technique, and the master insisted on sweeping the dojo for a year. The student was furious, but the master explained, "Sweep properly, and you learn posture, attention, humility, and a rhythm that prepares you for the sword." In our time, the sweeping is the daily, banal discipline that everyone resents. Hidetaka must sweep his own inner dojo by refusing to allow convenience to occupy the space meant for practice. The discipline of small, non-negotiable acts is the unseen architecture of future possibility. We must also consider the role of silence and withdrawal as strategic tools. Samurai often retreated to meditate, to fast, to sit in quietude. This withdrawal was not defeat, but recalibration. It allowed them to test their attachment to comfort. Imagine a man who withdraws from the conveniences of modern life for a week. He eats simply, sleeps on the floor, rises before dawn, and removes all entertainment. The first 2 days are torture. The third is clarity. The fourth is awakening. What the samurai realized is that comfort breeds a certain blindness, a blunting of appetite for truth. Withdrawal reveals what is truly necessary. In Hidetaka's life, a weekend of digital silence becomes a mirror. He discovers the depth of his restlessness and the precise points where ease siphons his attention. He no longer blames time or colleagues. He sees the architecture of his surrender. Discipline, however, must be intelligent. Musashi warned against rigidity for its own sake. Flexibility in perception and ruthless simplicity in action were his hallmarks. The samurai did not cling to traditions merely because they were old. They measured each practice by its effectiveness in cultivating the man. This is a modern injunction against fetishizing difficulty. The aim is not suffering, but clarity. If a ritual serves no purpose, if it does not sharpen attention, strengthen restraint, or cultivate presence, discard it. Discipline without discrimination becomes merely another comfort disguised as virtue. A crucial part of this work is learning to design environments that favor the behavior you want. The samurai lived minimally because accumulation is a liability on the battlefield. In modern life, accumulation is psychological as much as material. Unread subscriptions, obligations accepted out of politeness, open browser tabs that fragment attention. Hidetaka learns to treat his inbox like a danger zone, to limit the number of projects he keeps active, to remove subscriptions that vie for his attention with the seriousness of a rival. This is not austerity for vanity's sake. It is tactical. When fewer demands press on the mind, attention deepens. Depth is the rarest and most valuable resource in a distracted age. We must also speak plainly about rest. Samurai were not ascetics who did not sleep. They were strategists who understood the value of recovery. Discipline without renewal becomes brittle. The lesson here is not to minimize rest, but to structure it. Rest must be deep and undistracted. The samurai practiced rituals to mark transitions between work and rest, cleaning the sword, tending the garden, sharing a quiet meal. For Hidetaka, preparing a simple evening ritual, tea, a short walk, a fixed bedtime, signals the nervous system to recover. This quality of rest is a weapon against the thief of comfort, because it reduces the seduction of frantic downtime. The man who is well rested is less likely to seek numbing. Simplicity asks us to ask harder questions about what we value. The samurai asked themselves daily whether each action would prepare them for their death, a practice not to induce morbidity, but to sharpen priorities. If you imagine the end, you begin to see which comforts are truly dispensable. Hidetaka, imagining his last day, realizes that the late-night shows and the endless scrolling do not appear in memory. What appears are conversations, moments of presence, the feeling of having been true to one's work. This reflection is not meant to produce guilt, but to produce discernment. The discipline of asking, "Will this matter 1 year hence?" is a samurai test for modern decisions. We must not ignore pain, for it is the teacher most people flee. Samurai sought pain not to punish, but to discover durability. When a sword tests the body learns its limits and expands them. Modern people avoid pain with pillows of convenience, the constant entertainment, the soothing stimuli. Hidetaka begins to reintroduce disciplined pain into his life. Cold showers, a strict training schedule, the deliberate refusal to snack between meals. These acts are not to punish the self. They are to retrain the nervous system so that it recognizes discomfort as temporary and tolerable. Over time, the very perception of discomfort changes. Where once discomfort screamed escape, it now whispers passage. There is an uglier lesson from the samurai that we must confront: the danger of pride. Discipline, when it becomes identity armor, can harden into self-righteousness. To guard against this, samurai trained in humility, testing themselves with menial tasks and service to others. Hidetaka learns to serve. He teaches a younger colleague. He helps an elderly neighbor carry groceries. Such acts of ordinary service keep the heart soft even as the mind becomes resolute. True strength in the samurai tradition is not the absence of kindness, but its right ordering. As months pass, the changes in Hidetaka's life are not dramatic in the outward sense, but they are seismic inwardly. He wakes earlier, not with fervor but with a steady intention. He eats simply and feels the body respond. He finishes tasks because of the clarity of his edges, not because of heroic output. He practices silence, and in that silence, hears the needs of his life that had been drowned out by convenience. His relationships shift, not because he becomes colder, but because he becomes more present. The small rituals that once seemed trivial accumulate into an identity that holds. When a crisis comes, a sudden layoff at work, he meets it not with panic, but with a trained calm. He can tolerate uncertainty, because his life is no longer a house of cards built on expedience. The samurai understood that life is a series of tests. A man is not discovered in triumph, but in how he adapts after loss. Discipline, properly practiced, creates a mind that can navigate loss without surrender. It is not that the samurai did not feel grief or fear. They felt them, and, through practice, did not allow those feelings to become the captain of their ship. The comfort illusion steals the future by allowing feelings to dictate forms of action. The warrior reverses this. He fashions forms that guide feelings. There will be days when the old ease calls like an old friend, when the TV and the bed and the small pleasures seem more persuasive than the empty promise of future peace. On those days, remember Musashi's teaching. Do one small thing well. Sweep the floor. Wash a single cup. Tend to one task as if your life depends on it. Small acts, repeated with attention, are the stitches that repair a life ravaged by convenience. The disciplined life is not composed of grand vows, but of countless tiny refusals. In the end, there is no mystical formula, only the patient application of choice. The samurai's world was a harsh mirror. It forced men to notice exactly what they were. In our world, softness has become the mirror. It hides the contours of character. The remedy is not brutality, but intentionality. Create non-negotiables. The time you will rise, the first act you will perform upon waking, the manner in which you end your day. Design environments that remove temptation. Narrow your commitments to what can be done with excellence. Practice silence and the art of surrender to process. Each of these steps, small and seemingly inconsequential, compounds into a life that resists theft by ease. Hidetaka's life does not become perfect, but his future is no longer stolen from him in the hours of leisure. He sleeps with a steadier chest because he has learned to treat his attention as a sacred tool. He has seen the truth Musashi exemplified. Victory in life often means the simple refusal to be minor. There is a dignity in choosing austerity not for show, but for precision. There is a wisdom in understanding that comfort, like a soft cloak, will eventually smother the body it seeks to protect. So you stand at a decision point that is both ordinary and profound. Will you allow convenience to accumulate unchecked? Or will you adopt the austere practices that protect your attention and forge your identity? The samurai answer was never easy, but it was clear. Discipline is the art of choosing what you will not do. The rest will follow. Embrace the small, precise acts. Let silence become your teacher. Be willing to surrender to process. In doing so, you will recover a life that is not merely comfortable, but worthy of the attention you can finally give. When the day closes, do not seek applause. Seek fidelity to the form you have chosen. That fidelity, day by day, will move you toward a future no thief of comfort can claim.